In the end, it turned out I had met the man who killed me on 5 previous occasions. The first time was when I was about 16 or 17. I was in a McDonald's and he served me. I noticed his flaming red hair and I remember thinking, look at that dude. Glad I don't look like that. I ordered a filet-o-fish sandwich. I met him again about a year and a half later, my final summer in town, before heading off to university. I'd been fortunate enough to land a good-paying job working in the local hospital kitchen, where my main duty was running a big Hobart dishwashing machine. It appeared I was to replace the red-haired guy, whose name was Lance, and that he was supposed to train me, which he did, rather grudgingly. What impressed me about Lance, besides his thick red hair, was his attitude, his bad attitude. He complained about the job, about how dirty it was, about the boss, and about the other people, how stupid they were, but above all, about the pay. I'm blowing this pop stand, man. I'm blowing this pop stand and going out west. He struck a pose and intoned, "Go west, young man, go west." This monologue of complaint about the hospital as compared to the virtues of the West went on all day, interspersed with odd bits of information about the job and about actually running the dishwasher. At some points in the grand narrative, he was going to Calgary, at other points, the oil patch. But by the end of the day, he could have gone to hell for all I cared. I didn't like or respect the guy, to say the least. Never once did he ask me about my future plans, which involved heading to university to study drama. I was just there to listen to him and interject the odd question. Lance was self-absorbed, to put it mildly. It was a long day. A very long day. I never expected to see Lance again, but I did. The third time was during the Christmas holidays, after my first semester at university, at a New Year's Eve party. I was sitting in a dark corner talking to Charlotte, a girl I really, really liked. As in really, really liked. I liked her because she was attractive, short and slight, with long black hair and gray-blue eyes. And I knew what color her eyes were. That shows how much I liked her. But I also liked her because she was a free spirit, intellectual and artistic. Charlotte was the type of girl that, when you saw her reading D.H. Lawrence, it didn't look like a pose. In fact, she could have been a female character out of Lawrence. I always thought she was out of my league, but she seemed really engaged in our conversation, so I began to have hopes. And then Lance appeared out of nowhere. "Hey, Charlotte," he boomed, totally ignoring me as he sat down. Charlotte seemed happy to see him. Seemed very happy to see him. "Hi, Lance," she said with a big smile. "Jay was just telling me about studying drama." Lance burst out laughing. "Drama," he crowed, his voice full of derision. I didn't know how to defend myself, but I took my best shot. "How was Calgary?" This seemed to confuse him, and I guessed he had never gone there. What about Calgary? You said you were planning to go out there, out west. Hey, buddy, do I know you? Lance said angrily. I reminded him of our time in the dish room together and how he had told me he was Alberta bound. Never got there, he said, glaring at me. I got a better job around here. Oh, yeah? What doing? I didn't believe a word he said. But Lance didn't waste any time arguing with me. Instead, he grabbed Charlotte's hand, pulling her to her feet, and announced, "Quit wasting time with this loser, babe. I want to show you something." Charlotte went with him without a backward glance at me, while I ended up walking home alone, trying not to think about what Lance might be going to show her. I didn't see Lance again for 2 or 3 years, and when I saw him next, the 4th time, Charlotte was with him. I was walking up Yonge Street in Trana with a buddy who was going to school there in the Big Smoke. It was a warm August night, and street vendors had set up tables along the sidewalk. Lance and Charlotte had one, selling pieces of jewelry that Charlotte made. Supposedly, Charlotte greeted me warmly, while Lance just glared at me. I noticed they were both covered in tattoos, and I couldn't help wondering why a pretty woman like Charlotte would do that to herself. Lance spoke to me first, as Charlotte showed some of the jewelry to my friend. "We just do this on weekends," he said. "I've got a good job during the week. Down on Bay Street, eh?" Bay Street was Toronto's financial district, and I couldn't help thinking that if he really did work down there, it was as a janitor or security guard. "Are you selling a lot of stuff?" I asked him, just to say something. "Oh, yeah. Charles is amazing," he said in a rather offhand manner. Yeah, I thought to myself, it's amazing that she's with a loser like you. What a waste. A few young women had stopped to look at the jewelry, so we said our goodbyes and pushed on up Yonge Street. I was in a rather wistful mood for the rest of the evening, thinking about Charlotte, about what might have been, and in the end, I got rather drunk that night. I never saw Charlotte again. I don't know what eventually happened to her. The last time. I didn't see Lance again for over 15 years, but one winter's day, my doorbell rang, and opening my front door, I found a package waiting for me on the step. The delivery driver was walking down the driveway towards his truck, so being a polite Canadian, I called out, "Thank you." The driver was a big, bulky guy, clad in a winter coat. He threw a quick glance over his shoulder, muttered, "Yeah," and continued on to his truck. I only caught a glimpse of his face, broad, dissipated, the red hair thinning, and it wasn't until I was inside the house that I realized it was Lance. His manner had been so rude and offhand, I wondered if he had recognized my name on the parcel. I was a bit concerned to think he knew where I lived. The parcel contained some clothing I had ordered, and I was grateful it hadn't held anything he could have damaged or broken. But in the end, I convinced myself that Lance probably didn't even know my name, or that he had recognized me. and I forgot all about it. The next time I encountered Lance, he killed me. I was driving home from a late-night meeting, thankfully alone, when Lance's battered Dodge Ram pickup crossed lanes and struck me head-on. We were both killed instantly. Lance had 3 times the legal limit for alcohol in his system when the crash occurred. I came to in a dingy room which looked like the reception area in a hospital emergency ward. It even had the same hard, ugly plastic seats. Some bored-looking people sat behind desks, ignoring us. The staff? Lance was sitting next to me, looking extremely pissed off. What happened? I said. We're dead, asshole, he smirked. You had to hit me. I did nothing of the sort, I sputtered. You hit me. Lance laughed. At this point, what difference does it make? I have a wife and 3 children, I cried. And I actually began to cry. Well, I had nothing, Lance sneered. Death is the great equalizer, ain't it? I was filled with rage at this stupid, sullen excuse for a man. How someone like you gets into heaven is beyond me. Lance began braying with laughter, till his fat face turned as red as his remaining hair. When he finally recovered, his answer was, What makes you think this is heaven? Oh. The moral of the story? As Jean-Paul Sartre once said, hell is other people, but other people can also be heaven. The morgue. Midnight. 2 bodies on 2 separate tables lay covered by white sheets. And then suddenly, one of the bodies under one of the sheets sat up. The sheet dropped away to reveal an old man with long, disheveled hair, a battered, weather-beaten face, now blanched white in death, and a thin, emaciated body. The disheveled man surveyed his surroundings with his dark, glaring eyes, and then he slid from his perch and staggered across to the other table, where he pulled back the sheet covering the other body, which he then slapped hard across the face. The other body, the other man, opened its eyes. His eyes. The second body was that of a man of the same age as the disheveled man, but this man's appearance was more middle-aged than elderly. He had a large, well-nourished body, a handsome, boyish face, and a full head of hair, which had remained blonde. He opened a pair of bright blue eyes, squinting in the semi-darkness, and in a loud voice said, "Who hit me?" "I did," the disheveled man said quietly. "And who the hell are you?" the blond man demanded. "Don't you recognize me?" The blond man looked around in bewilderment, the blue eyes wide with amazement. "What is this place?" The morgue. The morgue? Yep. We're dead. Dead? That's impossible, the blond man sputtered. How can we be talking if we're dead? 'Cause some things transcend death, the disheveled man said. Some things transcend death, like hate. Hate. Bob. How do you know my name? The blond man barked. Don't you recognize me, Bob? The disheveled man repeated. No, it's Jesse. Who? Jesse Griner. Who? Look, Bub, do I really know you? Intimately. Where from? We grew up together, Jesse said, interrupting him. Bob stared closely at him for a moment. Oh, Jesse. Yes. Oh, Jesse. I heard you were on Skid Row, Bob said before laughing. Back to your roots, eh? Jesse stared at him coldly and eventually replied, Yes, back to my humble roots. Bob was still laughing. Nancy told me you proposed to her. Yes. Yes, I did. But she wouldn't have me, Jesse said quietly. As if she would have married a loser like you. Water seeks its own level, you know. I'm not entirely certain of that, Jesse said. Well, I am, Bob concluded, a smug smile on his broad, handsome face. When she turned me down, Jesse said, speaking as if to himself alone. When she turned me down, I went off the rails. I gave up on school and took to drinking and partying. There just didn't seem much point in continuing, in getting a degree without Nancy. I really loved her. Really, really loved her. Had always loved her. Bob had sat up on his table to sit facing Jesse. Suddenly, he shot forth an accusatory finger. Didn't you ask me for a job once? Jesse nodded his shaggy head. It was in the mailroom. I'd been out of work a long, long time. A very long time. It was my last chance to get back on my feet again, to find some stability in my life. But you turned me down. Bob smirked and now shook his head. How could I have hired you? Your collar was frayed, and your shoes, they were virtually falling apart. I'd been out of work for over a year, Jesse cried. My company had a certain image to maintain, Bob said. Standards. Is that why you hired your fool of a nephew instead? Bob shrugged. It made my sister happy. All in the family, eh? I would have worked really hard for you, Bob. It really was my last chance. I hit the skids after that. Ended up homeless. He looked around the interior of the morgue and then added, and ended up here. Huh. And you wonder why Nancy married me, Bob said smugly. Is that why you cheated on her? Repeatedly? Bob slid off the table and began to walk towards the door. It's not my habit to discuss my personal affairs with bums, he said curtly. Jesse watched him go, and as he got close to the door said, You can't get out. Nonsense. But when he turned the doorknob to open the door, nothing happened. What the hell? Bob muttered. You can't leave, Jesse said calmly. You're dead. If I'm dead, how is it I'm walking around? How is it I'm talking to you?" Bob shouted. "Because the power of hate can transcend even death," Jesse said. "And I hate you for what you did to Nancy." "Quit talking about my wife, you filthy bum," Bob yelled. "She told me all about it," Jesse yelled back. "She saw me on the street, then took me into a nearby Tim Hortons, and for 2 hours poured out her heart to me about your cruelty and selfishness. And you know what? You know what? She kept repeating, 'I should have married you, Jesse. I should have married you. You loved me, Jesse. You loved me.'" "That's a lie," Bob screamed, his voice choking with rage. "Is it?" Jesse retorted. "Are you telling me you never cheated on her? I'm not discussing it with a loser like you." "And a month later, Nancy was dead," Jesse said in a voice choked with emotion. "A suicide. The finest woman in the world. And she killed herself because of you." "I don't see that any of this is any of your damn business," Bob said, his voice beginning to sound a trifle bored. I resolved to die myself when I learned that Nancy was dead," Jesse continued. "But first I had a job to do, a task to perform, a final task." Bob wasn't listening. Am I really dead?" "Yes." "How did it happen?" Jesse reached out and took Bob's arm. Come, I'll show you." Bob resisted at first, but after a moment, he went along with Jesse. In a darkened corner of the morgue was a full-length mirror. The two men stood before it naked. Hardly an inspiring sight. Jesse was still talking as he hunted for the nearest light switch. "I stole a carving knife from a big box store. Now where is that damn light switch? I'm having a hard time seeing. Maybe because I'm dead. Anyway, I waited for you to get home last night and... Oh, here it is. Here's the switch." Jesse flicked on the overhead fluorescent lights, and Bob screamed, for the bright light had revealed a gaping hole on the left side of his broad chest. "You know, Bob, I would have sworn you didn't have a heart." "But you did. You did have a heart. Till I cut it out and ate it." The moral of the story? Who says Warren doesn't have a heart? He does. He keeps it in a jar on his desk. He was waiting for me as soon as I stepped off high school property. "Think you're better than me, don't you, Professor, eh?" Rob said, his acne-scarred face flushed as red as his flaming red hair. I don't have any quarrel with you, Rob," I answered as calmly as I could, trying not to panic. "Think you're better than everyone else, eh? Talking you like you was friggin' Shakespeare, eh?" he yelled in my face. "Look, I don't think I started to say, when Rob punched me in the mouth. I should have been expecting it, but it still knocked me back on my heels, while Rob's next punch knocked me to the ground as it knocked off my glasses. My books and papers scattered across the pavement to be kicked and stomped on by the crowd which had gathered to watch the fight. Not that it was much of a fight, at least not on my part. "Get him! Get the professor! Kick his ass!" they howled. They called me Shakespeare, Four Eyes, and a whole dictionary of filthy names. Every time I tried to get up, to try and fight back, Rob punched me in the face. All I could see was stars, an entire constellation. Finally, Rob kicked me in the stomach, knocking the wind out of me, and I just lay there, gasping for air and weeping, while my classmates showered me with spit. "That'll teach you to be smart," Rob crowed, giving me a final kick in the shins before walking off in triumph, the hero of the hour. No one stayed around to help me. Eventually I got up, gathered up what was left of my homework, and walked slowly home, beaten, humiliated, and worried. I had to spend the next 4 years with these bastards, and they weren't going to leave me in peace. I cleaned myself up in a filling station washroom. If Mom saw me the way I was, she would have insisted in calling the cops and charging Rob, which would have made things worse. There was a rule back in high school. You didn't rat people out. Ever. I opened the washroom door to find Milo waiting for me. Without waiting for me to speak, he said, "I'm ashamed of you, man. I told those guys you'd fight, and you didn't even try. You didn't even try to fight back. What a wimp." Milo's words hurt worse than the beating. And damn it all, I started to cry again. I woke up. I was lying in bed in a darkened bedroom. I looked at my watch. 1:13 a.m. The bedroom door softly opened, and the black silhouette of a person stood in the doorway. "Who are you?" I said, to which the shadow replied, "A friend." And then they shut the door. I had just punched into work when the boss came up to me and said, "I'm laying you off." Of course I knew why. The boss's son and I had gotten into a tussle over a girl the night before, and I won. I had come a long way from the days when guys like Rob or anyone else could terrorize me. I have to give the boss some credit. He didn't try to bullshit me. "You know why. We don't want you around after today." The boss shook his head in disgust and added, "After all we did for you too. Collect your pay at quitting time and go." "If I'm getting fired, I'll take my money and go now," I said angrily. His son was the one who started the fight. He shouldn't have gone running to Daddy, the wimp. "Leave now and forget getting paid, period," the boss sneered. "You can't do that to me," I protested. McNeely, the foreman, a real bootlicker, had joined the conversation. "Yes, he can," he said, no doubt hoping to score some brownie points with the boss. I needed the money, so they had me. "I won't forget you guys," I said, through gritted teeth. "Is that a threat?" McNeely said. But before I could answer, the boss slapped me across the face. Hard. I raised my hands to strike back, but the boss stopped me by saying, "Go ahead. Hit me. McNeely here will tell the cops you hit me first, and they'll arrest you. They'll believe us over a punk like you." "That's right," McNeely added. "The cops don't like trash either. Now, get to work." They had me. There was nothing I could do but walk away. And as I did, I heard them laughing behind me. "I won't forget you guys," I said to myself. "I'll never forget you. Ever." I woke up. I was lying in bed in a darkened bedroom. I looked at my watch. 1:13 a.m. The bedroom door softly opened, and the black silhouette of a person stood in the doorway. "Who are you?" I said, to which the shadow replied, "I'm here to watch over you." And then they shut the door. I had received a tip that my wife was meeting him, at a recreation area just outside of town. Her car was parked at one end of the parking lot, while his truck, a black Dodge Ram, was parked at the other end. They didn't see me come up. They were busily engaged. I got all the action on my phone. All of it. I rapped on the glass, and when she looked up, I said, "For better or worse, huh?" "Wait, I can explain," she cried. "I think I got the picture," I said, walking away. Of course, he had to get out of the truck. He was a big burly dude with shaggy hair and tats and that ineffable whiff of the trailer park. It's bad enough to have your wife cheat on you, but with someone like that? "Hey!" he yelled after me. "You're butt naked!" I yelled back over my shoulder as I went back to the car and drove away from my marriage. I woke up. I was lying in bed in a darkened bedroom. I looked at my watch. 1:13 a.m. The bedroom door softly opened, and the black silhouette of a person stood in the doorway. "Who are you?" I said, to which the shadow replied, "I'm your guardian angel." "You look more like a shadow person to me," I said. "I am indeed a shadow. Your shadow." "My shadow?" I scoffed. "What the hell is this place?" "It is indeed hell. The hell that lives inside your mind. The hell you carry around with you. The hell of memory. Evil memory. The hell that you can never leave because you've chosen not to leave it, but to revisit it over and over and over again. The hell you will not let go of. The hell of the past. Good night." And with that, the shadow, my shadow, gently closed the door, leaving me alone with my thoughts, in darkness, and leaving me in hell. The moral of the story? Does hell really exist? Or is it all in the mind? Warren here. I'd like to take this opportunity to forgive all those who have ever harmed or offended me, and to ask their forgiveness in return. Mind you, if I ever did anything to you, it's because you started it. But in the elevated spirit of forgiveness, I'll overlook your stupidity and obnoxiousness. Don't you feel better already? Tell me a story, Grandpa. I automatically reached for one of my granddaughter's favorite picture books and began to read, but she was sound asleep after only 2 or 3 pages. I gazed down on her sweet, innocent face, and my heart filled with a tenderness that was almost painful. I found myself silently praying, "Oh God, God, please protect this little mite from harm and from evil men like me." Rising, I turned off the bedroom lights and quietly shut the door behind me. I have led a blessed life, a loving wife, a millionaire's family, a son and a daughter, now 5 grandchildren. I'd had a successful and profitable career. Doors just seemed to open for me, and I retired a CEO. And I had also murdered 3 people in cold blood. It's funny. I hadn't thought about them for years, but now that I'm retired, thoughts of the past keep flooding in, even though it had all been so very, very long ago. Darlene was the first girl, the first woman I had ever loved, my first sexual partner. I was a virgin. She wasn't. And as she was my first real girlfriend, I fell madly in love, or perhaps just in lust with her. Darlene was attractive, rather than beautiful, with thick chestnut hair, a full figure, and a frank, engaging smile. I believe her eyes were brown. Yeah, they were brown. She was extremely good in bed, and we couldn't keep our hands off each other. She was like a drug I couldn't do without, and we were inseparable, and probably insufferable. I spent every moment that I could with Darlene, until my aunt died out west, and I ended up going out of province for 2 weeks. The first few nights away, I phoned her. This was long before cell phones, texting, and the internet, and we had long, erotic conversations. But after about a week, she stopped answering. Right away, I knew there was something wrong. I would have come home right away, but it was impossible. I was stuck there, and when I finally returned, I found my worst fears confirmed. I was heading down the street towards her apartment when I saw her walking towards me, hand in hand, with Rob. Rob was cool, and everything I was not. He was very tall, NBA tall and slim, with blond, handsome, arrogant features. He was always extremely polite, but also made you feel that you were beneath him, and that he knew you were beneath him, and that he knew you knew. I hated his guts. The situation was bad enough. But with Rob? Don't make a scene, Rob murmured. I made a scene. It ended with Darlene telling me in a contemptuous tone, You don't own me, you know. Goodbye. It was one of the most humiliating experiences of my life. I still feel it, after all these years. And yeah, I cried, but thankfully not in front of them. And after I had dried my tears, I wanted revenge. But how? My prayers were answered, perhaps by Satan, but answered in a very strange manner. I was passing through one of the seedier parts of town when I saw Travis working a street corner. Working, which in his case meant the retail of illicit substances. I had a sudden inspiration. A satanic inspiration, perhaps. Travis laughed when he saw me. Hey, man, you're the last person I thought I'd see down here. Long time no see, Trav. Can I buy you a coffee? I want to ask you something. Make it a brewski and you got a deal. Travis took me to a nearby dive bar, and after a quiet conversation in a back corner, I got the gun. It was a .44 caliber. Big enough to stop anything, Trav told me. And when he asked me what I wanted it for, I said, target shooting? Travis just smiled. I didn't know much about guns, but I was sure it was powerful enough for what I planned to do. For what, at the time, I thought I had to do. That I must do. They were in the back of Rob's Buick and only had time to look up when I pulled the back door open. I fired 4 times. I shot Darlene 3 times. And she just said, no, before she died. I closed the car door afterwards. And believe it or not, I was crying. Crying so hard I could hardly see. But I had one more thing to do that evening. I found Travis working the sidewalk in front of a construction zone and told him I had to speak to him urgently. So we went inside a half-finished building. This was an era before they had security on building sites. Trav was walking ahead of me, so he didn't see me take the .44 from under my jacket, press the barrel against his right temple, and pull the trigger. Gosh, Travis had way more brains than I thought. I placed the gun in his right hand. I was wearing gloves, of course, so I didn't leave any fingerprints. And then I went home, where I fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. I had managed to sneak in without anyone noticing, and was in bed passed out when my horrified mother came in to wake me up. Travis was blamed, of course. No one suspected me at all. The police believed Trav had murdered Rob as a result of a drug deal gone wrong. Darlene was merely collateral damage, while I was cast in the role of grieving ex-boyfriend. For I was grieving for all I had lost. My first love. For believe it or not, I still love Darlene. And grieving for my lost innocence. I found myself suddenly bursting into tears. In the end, fearing for my mental health, my parents sent me to live with my uncle's family out west, thinking to remove me from the neighborhood of my sorrows. I never came back. A few years later, I met my wife while attending college. We married, had beautiful children, and now beautiful grandchildren. And I enjoyed a brilliant career. I've been so fortunate, and so Darlene just sort of faded away. But you know, now that I'm entering my twilight years, I find myself thinking about her again, about Rob, and about Travis. They never had the opportunity to enjoy the things I've enjoyed. And I regret that. I guess I shouldn't have murdered them. In the end, the situation wasn't all that important. Not important enough to commit murder. But that's one of the consolations of aging. The beginning of wisdom. The moral of the story? It's never important enough to hurt someone. Violence is never the answer. If this is your first visit to my channel, please consider subscribing. My name is Warren, and I write and tell original ghost stories and original horror stories featuring such cryptids as the Night Floaters, werewolves, and the Black-Eyed Children. So again, please consider subscribing. Please help me to reach my goal of 2,500 subs in 2022. Till midnight. Cheers. Pictures used in today's video, courtesy of Pix Here, that's PX Here, while the music was The Haunting Aftermath by that patron of the internet, Kevin MacLeod.